So, haven't done a video in a very long time in vlog form. Still, obviously, racking up the uploads on YouTube again. I reiterate every time I use it as a Dropbox. So I think we're up to over 3,600 videos, but that is in like 15 years. And I had a huge gap where I didn't use YouTube. So yeah, first vlog. What has been happening? A lot. Burnt nose from the Azores. I didn't really do much in the Azores, unfortunately. I booked this trip, and I'm in the airport now, over a year ago. So it was sort of a case of I tend to plan things if I know for sure I'm going to be somewhere, and I sometimes book stuff as backups. So I think I said in a previous video I was in the UK for the first time in 2 years. Which is off the back of the most insane story, which seems to be the case in my life. Getting thrown in prison in Lebanon, of all places, for being a journalist. And that prison was pretty crazy. It was the Ministry of Defence's personal dungeon, so everyone there was political or military oriented. And then, jokingly, I thought for actually a long time, which is the reason I haven't returned to the UK again. There's other things with them taking my passport away and such other sort of political stuff. So I didn't ever want to go back, which I said many times in previous videos I would never return. But I wanted to move to Russia, as I said. I still would love to move to Russia, to be honest, but there was an issue with the visa, so I went back. And on my return, counter-terrorism police detained me at the airport. Counter-terrorism police, which is just basically if you're white or a national, and preferably a man for them. If you are politically aware, they are shutting down every single channel globally. But of course it differs for each country. They have to stagger it depending on how the public respond. They have so many advanced systems, analytically speaking, that can account for every variable in a society to determine how they quell and curb the main enemy within that population, which is always the national entity. So anyone that has traditional values, religious people, so long as they are Western in their religious outlook, they will be quelled, they will be curbed, they will be arrested, anything. It's so advanced that even things like casino wins, if people don't understand like really how much of their life is digital now. Depending on your race and your name, your address. So if they can't determine a race, they will look at your name, they will run it through an algorithm, and they will say, well, the probability of this person living in this area with this name being non-white, let's say, is 96.5%. And they will give you a higher probability of winning at casinos now based on your race and your disposition as a whole. And I use that as an example because that correlates to every aspect of your life. Literally, you go into a supermarket, you download the app, the promotions that you see will be different based on where you live. Who you are as a person can be accounted for by the state sizably, almost entirely for the majority of the population, right? Which is, of course, why they're pursuing essentially a digital code for each character, a barcode, if you like. Everyone is going to become a walking barcode. So fast forward, after the 2 arrests back-to-back, or 2 detentions back-to-back. I love how when you say, oh, you're arresting me or detaining me, they say, oh, you're arresting me or kidnapping me. They always say, no, we're not. We're just detaining you. Can I leave? Have I been charged with anything? No. What have I done? We can't tell you that, sir. It's very much the trial by Kafka, which I've quoted before. And a lot of people, if you don't live in this realm, if you don't understand what's going on, I promise you, this is about as low grade as it gets when it comes to having an alternative perspective and being active with it. There are people that get killed every single day. There are people that die. Higher grade personas you'll see on the internet, on the news feeds, depending on whether they can get away with not reporting on it. Let's say it's an accident most of the time, of course, a heart attack, falling down the stairs, aeroplane crash, all this stuff. This is the higher grade stuff for people that are sort of really deep into it. And then people like myself that are sort of on the fringe, on the lowly fringes of understanding how these people operate, then you just get bullied and hassled and heckled. You get thrown in prisons for no reason whatsoever. And eventually, if you stumble across something that they perhaps don't want you to know, and you're, I don't know what is going on with this noise, and you're able to sort of affix that to a public domain, some sort of streaming service, and make people aware of what's happening, then perhaps you'll be on the hit list. That's essentially how the operation works. So, left the UK, and this is really the last time I'll be in the UK. I left 2 weeks ago, went to Santiago de Compostela, and then I went to the Azores. These are all trips I booked as a backup should the Russian visa not have come through, which unfortunately is the case. Again, with Russia, people don't understand that the world is centralized to a singular entity. There is no Russia, there is no China, there is no Iran, there is no United States, there is no Ukraine. They're all one entity, and they create this artificial sentiment based off of national boundaries where they tell you, okay, well, this is the enemy state, and then they concoct and create wars for intentional division to keep people perpetually controlled. So there is no Ukrainian war, organically speaking. They're just throwing men on either side into a conflict to create division, to create distraction, and importantly, to kill off and quell the European population, which has been the case since pre-First World War. Everyone talks about genocide and slavery and all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. And of course, people die everywhere in the world, and people are discriminated against everywhere in the world. But if you actually look at the figures of who is actually being targeted and by whom, which unfortunately I don't like curbing my speech, but I'm on my last strike on YouTube and Instagram. BitChute's already been taken off the internet within the UK. If we mention who is responsible for doing this, then unfortunately the channel goes and I can never speak to you guys again. So I'm actually censoring myself, and I'm therefore part of the problem. But as an overall, I think it's better not to mention that, so I can sort of speak to you guys about certain things. So yeah, if you look at the First World War and the Second World War, the number of people that died, how people were killed, with what regiments, if you go down to even the specifics of Russian regiments storming Berlin, Russian regiments responsible for killing Polish officers, they actually didn't use Caucasian white Russian regiments. They actually imported soldiers from Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan and Central Asia as a whole within the paradigm of the USSR, because people actually have a sense of morality more so when it's within their community, within their racial categorization. That is what binds people. You know, you have shared interests, you have racial profiles. These are what keep people naturally together. So it would have caused a bit of a stir if Russian regiments used, I'm going on a tangent already, their own white Russians to kill white Polish officers. So what they did is they imported very rough nomadic peoples from their Central Asian empire, and those are the people that were responsible for the rape of Berlin, quite literally, the mass rape of over 1 million people in 1945. And I'm using this as an example because Ukraine's the exact same thing. It's white people killing white people. Ukrainian men are being kidnapped on the streets by, we can mention them, by sizably Jewish, let's say, mercenaries, under the guise of the regime, which is sizably governed by that entity. And yeah, Europe is being essentially quelled and destroyed. We see that through the so-called refugee crisis, which isn't, of course, a crisis at all, where men from 25 to early mid-30s are being imported en masse and being distributed to each and every country. Of course, Spain has just allowed 500,000 migrants to settle with citizenship, sizably from places like Pakistan and Syria and Afghanistan, etc. And that's the similar scenario everywhere in the West. And it's not something that's modern. It's something that has been happening for hundreds, if not thousands of years. It's the same as how the financial market works. You build up a commodity, you build up a stock, you build up a brand. So Europe was built at the turn of the century to be the sort of prime real estate, if you like, the industrial superpower, as was the United States thereafter. You build and then you knock down, and that's how you intentionally keep people divided, and you yourself profit as a corporate entity or the overarching body, the overarching authority. So before Europe, China had their empire, Iran under the Persians had their empire. You go to South America and you see the Incas and the Mayans and the Aztecs. It's the same everywhere in the world. Every people has their golden age. artificially sponsored by the same cabal over generations through an artificially rigged monetary system. And then they completely destroy that civilization and replace the potent and prominent regime with another geographical location, whether it's in Africa or Australia or China. That's how the system works. It's completely fluid. So we now, as Europeans, are at the point where society has been already completely deconstructed, and they are transitioning European society and Western society into a fully digitized authoritarian regime, period. And COVID was used as a sort of guise for that, a bit of a test run, a beta system, all these digital ID cards, seeing how people would react, where they would react, importantly, and then combating that animosity towards the state or that opposition with all kinds of policies and legislation to get people on the same playing field. But of course, under a system which is essentially centralized anyway within Europe, most countries conform to the European Union, whereby their policies are determined by an unelected, unaccountable, centralized body. It was pretty fucking easy anyway. A little tangent there. So I found myself here in Lisbon, left the Azores. We've got a party somewhere in Spain. I don't want to name exactly where it is. And then we go to Algeria. So that was the backup. Had I not got the Russian visa, which turned out to be the case, predictably, because they're on the same team, they reject people that are actually pro-Russian. I'm not contradicting myself, because Russia is the same country in essence. They're all governance within each and every country in the world is centralized to one authority. So they're all on the same team. They just create these divisionary conflicts and wars, etc., to keep people under the belief that there are different channels, there are different political dispositions, right? So if you find, actually, there's a very interesting example. There's a YouTuber called Bold and Bankrupt, a guy that does travel sort of stuff and has over 5 million subscribers and used to be married to a Russian lady. And his videos were always very pro-Russian. When you look at the sort of context of what he was making, he was also always very sort of pro-Russian culture. So the videos that he produced would have more benefit to Russia than they would sort of negativity and anyway, this guy was banned from the country because, again, they don't want people with influence online highlighting not necessarily the political pros of a state, but showing that everybody in the world is very much conjoined and aligned in their dispositions and their outlook on life. Most people just want to be content, have a good time, bring up a family, whether they're black, white, brown, whether they're from the Philippines or Australia or New Zealand, Brazil, Portugal, it doesn't matter. People as a whole, as mammals, as animals, you could say, have generally the same outlook on life. And part of the system that they've implanted is to make people believe that there are these creatures that call themselves human under a different flag and a different regime that want to destroy them, and that's how war is concocted, through this propaganda. So if you have someone that is going across borders continually as their profession and highlighting the similitude in values, irrespective of the language and the race and the continent, it causes a problem for them. So these are the first people to go. Anyone that is aware, that has a platform on the internet, which is their ultimate weapon. Everyone uses the internet. We almost rely wholly on the internet now, which they've been decommissioning for a very long time now. I remember 10 years ago, as I've said in the previous video, you used to be able to go on Google or Ask Jeeves or DuckDuckGo, any of these browsers, which are all owned by the same people anyway, but you used to be able to type anything in, and you'd scroll to the base page and you'd have 10 million results, 15 million results, dog, cat, shoe, house, garage, whatever. Now you can type in things that are seemingly very simple, and sometimes you don't even reach the first page because the results have been omitted completely. So they're bringing everything under control, which has been the case for a long time, but certainly the internet allowed people for a short period to explore things that perhaps weren't obtainable in the physical realm through books and sort of, material you can hold and graft in your hands. So anyway, yes, another tangent. We go to Algeria, and from Algeria I go back to Central Asia, so back to Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, where I used to live, and from there we decide where's best to go. But the world is becoming so... they have such a stranglehold on everything now that really, until you visit these places, you may not realize that everything is now becoming singular and under one banner. When I was in Kyrgyzstan for a couple of years, I saw the transition like that. One day everyone's living nomadically, there's hardly any properties on booking.com, people don't have an awareness of things like TikTok and Instagram, which is a great thing. And then the next day you have the Christmas Coca-Cola ritual going through the streets of Bishkek. And unfortunately, that's when you know a country is at its decline, or a country has been infiltrated almost completely through its governance, when you have Coca-Cola driving through the streets without any warrant for such, without any demand. And now if you look at Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, this huge Central Asian market, you have a market which completely mirrors and mimics what you see in the so-called West. You can go to places that you'd think aren't aligned to our sort of materialist consumerist value set, but you'll find people are chugging the very same things in the middle of nowhere now because it's artificially inseminated upon them by this lobby group, who I'm sure you know who I mean, and we all do. That's why mentioning them gets you shut down, gets you taken off airplanes, and gets you thrown in custody. So yeah, sorry about the noise. It's a little bit problematic, but yeah. So the game plan essentially is, there were, in my opinion, 2 places in the world that you can live right now in the whole world, and this is coming from someone. I've been traveling for 12 years continuously, over 120 countries, most of them multiple times. The 2 best places you can live right now: Brazil in the south, Santa Catarina preferably, and Kyrgyzstan still, even though Kyrgyzstan is now in that transition phase. I lived there for a couple of years, and unfortunately for me now, it's sort of semi-ruined, but as a place to go and settle temporarily. Central Asia is still a great option, and Kyrgyzstan is the best country within that region. So you've got Kyrgyzstan, or you've got Brazil, and now I'm weighing up where's best to go. Ideally, I would have liked to have returned to Russia, having been there when I was a sort of young child, but seeing it from an adult perspective and really sort of getting my claws into the culture, let's say, but it's really not a healthy place to be because, again, it's part of the system politically. I'm not talking about the standardized political narrative you hear about. I'm talking about being in a system which is going to be sacrificed, essentially. It is one of the peak Caucasian countries, one of the prime Caucasian countries, and they're just stirring the pot like they did with Venezuela. They're stirring the pot like they did with Iran, and then one day, bang, they're going to take it out. This is what they do every time. They keep people on the sidelines, keep cultures on the sidelines that they inevitably want to destroy. And then randomly you find yourself watching on TV or on some news feed in an airport, Iranians getting bombed out. And it's always the same people responsible. And I think we spoke about this as we predicted COVID, we predicted the Iranian war. Everything we predicted. I literally had a conversation with someone a few weeks ago saying in a few weeks they're going to bomb Iran, and here we go. It's the same system, the same series of events. So because of the sound, I'll have to leave it there, but I'll post something up when I arrive in Algeria for sure. And yeah, all the best. Remember, you've got to leave your country where you have the option to.